deal with the fact that we can't create more than one new note. So the way I'm going to solve this right now is not the permanent solution. It's how we're going to do it for now until we get to routing. But it's okay. It's an okay way to do it. So what I'm thinking is if I actually submit the form, maybe that clears it out. You get what I mean? So let's add a submit button to note form. Underneath, this is indented wrong. Underneath our text area and the paragraph that contains it, I'll just put a button of type submit. I'll label it save and new. Or maybe add another one. I don't know. We do, but it's way over in the sidebar. And I don't want to deal with that right now. But I like where your head's at. We're going to do it the easy way because it's not the point for right now. But yes, that is a lovely button. So that has no border or anything. That's hideous. What if I add one more little CSS thing? Like you see, you can't even tell it's a button. It's just text. So let's go to note form CSS. I'm going to add one more rule down here. Or here I have note form button, which is setting border to none, background to none, padding to 0, and note form button, blah, blah, blah. So underneath those, I'm going to put another rule that I'm going to copy in Slack. Set the background color to something nice and pretty. Give it some padding. Give it a border radius so it's rounded. Make the font a little bigger. White on blue. That's better. So that's going to submit. So I'm not going to put a click handler on that. I'm going to put a submit handler on the form, right? So note form on the form, I will say on submit equals some function. How about we name it handle submit? I'm going to do the property initializer thing again. We'll probably need that event to prevent default, right? And because it's an arrow function, we know this is going to be bound correctly, even though it's an event handler. So what I want to do in here is make this a different note. Why does it just keep changing it and immediately changing it over here? What can I do? What can I do to make it quit doing that? How can I make it not the same node object? Make it a blank node again. If I just like emptied out the title and body. Oh, okay. Yeah. Right? So let's do that. In handle submit, how about we just say this dot set state, and we'll set note to this dot blank note. Boy, it's handy that I wrote that as a separate function. making lots of small methods not only kind of makes it readable and gives you an opportunity to label things so you can tell what the point is, but if you do happen to need to reuse it later, it's easy. But even if you don't think you're going to use something more than once, there are benefits to making it a separate thing because it gives you an opportunity to name it, which kind of acts as documentation. If I just put a blank note in here, hard-coded a blank note, you'd have to look over it to see that it's blank. But if I call this .blank note here, it's very obvious what this line's doing. It's setting it to a blank one. And if you read this function and it had a terrible name, like do things, you have to read it and say, well, I don't even know that that's a note. Sure, I could set a local variable named that, but what's the point of this? By naming it blank note, it sort of becomes self-documenting. You know what it's there for, because we named it what it does. So, good variable names, good method names. They not only help other people who read your code, they help future you when you read your own code. Does it work? Form on submit equals a whole lot of nothing. I never actually put handle submit in here. I have a different error. Handle submit's not defined. Why? This handle submit. It's a method, and this is an actual class. All right. Title your note. Please work. Please, I'm hungry. Save and new. There it is. If I type another one, did it really work? Did it? Save and new. Boom, there it is. Or whoomp, there it is if you prefer. Now I did, well, let's, this is good. So now we can get rid of these hard-coded notes. Those are silly. So back in app.js, we'll set our initial note list not to these two notes, but to an empty object. That was just there so that we could see what was happening on the page. Whack, whack. Not state equals nothing. State with notes, which is nothing. Empty object. Okay. Now there's nothing there. Now there is. Now there's another thing. Yeah. So the last part of the homework, the last level of bonus credit, had to do with clicking those things. So what do we do here? Add a new blank note when the form is submitted. Let's see if we can very quickly do that last piece of homework, or at least talk through it. We want it so that when we click this, the form changes. I'm gonna vote talk through it instead of do it. Who made that work? Anybody? Dom, what'd you do? Yeah, like when you click it from the note list, have it actually populate the... So he lifted the state for the node object, meaning, like instead of just living here, that is actually the state of a higher component in the chain. Why? Because we have to be able to affect this, right? We have to be able to affect the form with this thing. So it can't just live on the note. It needs to live on a mutual parent of them, like main or app. So you have to have a new piece of state on, we'll say app, that contains whatever the current note that you're working on is. So if you do that, then you could have an on-click here that updates that, Probably by adding a method to app and calling it from there. Is that what you did? And then down, you would have to pass that down through props to the form, and that's the one whose value you would show here. Does that make sense? So two things need to happen. This thing needs to be able to set what the current node is, and this form needs to be able to get what that current node is. So the current note now needs to be a piece of state on a higher order component, like app. I'm not going to do it right now. If you want to do it still, you're encouraged to do so. We will eventually do this a completely different way when we add routing. Excuse me, so it may not be the next thing you want to do, but now that we've described how to do it and we have some practice passing these things around, it's actually a pretty good piece of homework. Did you make delete work too? Anybody else made delete work? How'd you do that, Naomi? Where'd you even put the delete button? So we're going to have to remove something from state, right? So we probably need another method on app that, well, in this case, it's not an array, so I can't call splice. How do we delete something from an object? I think we've done it before, right? So if we have an object, let meals equal breakfast, eggs, lunch, twamiches. And then I want to delete lunch out of there. I can say delete keyword meals.lunch. Check out meals. No more twamiches. So I'd have to call delete to get it out of there. So that's what we could do. We could make the delete button call a method on app. Make sure you pass in at least the key so you know which item to delete out of the thing. So that's how we could do delete. So I have everything committed and pushed, right? I am presently thinking probably the homework should just be do all the bonus credit from yesterday. Most people didn't get it, obviously, because it was pretty dang hard. So the homework today is just to do all the bonus credit from yesterday. If you already did it, think of other ways that you could enhance this. See if you can figure out how to make this thing actually work. So this is supposed to be how you create a new blank one. This button isn't supposed to be here. If you look at the finished version, that's how it works. If you look at actual Evernote, which is what we're ripping off here. Yeah. Evernote, it's a real thing. If I sign into Evernote, maybe I should make sure that there's not like some some note that you shouldn't see. Oh man, I'm so glad I did this on my other monitor. So here's Evernote. You can see looks pretty similar. So yeah, blah blah blah. Click on these things. It's not the same font because it's. Oh yeah, it's proprietary. I don't have access to it. So I picked one from Google Fonts that looks similar. So anyway, notice there's no new. I just start typing over here, blah blah blah, and I'm working on this note from now until eternity, unless I go over here and either select a different one or click the little plus, and then I get a blank one. So, yep. So that's what we're doing. So again, the homework today is just do all the levels of bonus credit from yesterday. If you've gotten past that, see if you can enhance this some other way. Yeah, just keep practicing React. Go in peace.